Hello, welcome to the interview here on France 24. Now, the U.S. presidential race is entering the home stretch to Election Day with back-to-back party conventions over the coming 2 weeks. Now, Republicans are staging theirs first. Now, as they gather in Tampa, Florida, most polls, not all, most polls show the main challengers, Mitt Romney and Barack Obama, in a virtual dead heat. Now, recent history shows that the candidate with a lead going into the party convention period tends to win the presidency. But what happens when the race, as the polls are showing now, is this tight? Now, joining me today from Washington, D.C., my guest to help answer that question, a man who has spent his career tracking polls, analyzing them, for America's perhaps best-known pollster, Gallup. You've probably heard of it. Frank Newport, welcome to the show.
Thank you. My pleasure to be with you.
I'm also going to mention that this is, you also host a weekly radio show, What Are We Thinking, it's called. You've written a lot about public opinion and winning the White House. And this is your 6th presidential election. But I'd like to go right to the numbers here. I said that this race, most polls show in a virtual dead heat. Up until early this week, you had Obama and Romney at 46% each. I'd like our viewers, we're going to put up on our screen what your latest Gallup tracking poll shows. Mitt Romney has gained a point. He's now actually ahead by 47%. And today, the Republican convention is essentially opening because of that storm of the delay. What do you make of that 1-point gain? Should we look at that and make a lot of it, given what I just said about the lead being crucial going into the conventions?
Probably I would not. You know, statistically, to say that Romney is 1 point ahead doesn't differentiate it a lot from when they were tied over the past week or so, or if Obama was 1 point ahead. Now, technically, he is ahead, but I would say in the broadest sense, the way to characterize this race now is that they're very, very close. They're tied right now. And so I don't think we can use that 1-point lead to say, aha, that means Romney's going to win the election. What it tells us here at Gallup is that the race is very close.
Now, there's something interesting here as well. Gallup and I guess other analysts have found that there's that traditional, Americans call it the convention bounce, whereby candidates typically will gain about 5 points in the polls coming out of the conventions. Now, if both parties, both candidates gain the 5 points, is it fair to say the convention doesn't really matter that much in the end?
Well, that's an excellent point. It used to be that in the United States, conventions were spread apart, so the Republicans might have theirs and get a bounce in the polls. That is, the Republican candidate would rise in the polls, and then there'd be a period of weeks, and then the Democrats would have theirs. But now they're back to back, and you're absolutely right. If history plays out like it has, we would see Mitt Romney gaining in the polls through this weekend, and then Barack Obama and the Democrats start their convention in Charlotte, North Carolina, next Monday, and then all of a sudden Obama would just gain it right back. So when the dust settles and we're here talking in mid-September, we might be right back where we started. Now, every election is different. We're going to wait and see. Maybe Romney will keep his bounce. Maybe Romney won't get a bounce. Maybe Obama will get a bounce. We don't know. We're dealing with averages here. But the point is that since both candidates tend to gain, we may end up with a net no change by the middle of September.
By the middle of September, which is when you're going to take your new measures and see sort of where the playing field, the battlefield stands. Frank, I want to show our viewers now another batch of numbers, and this is also Gallup. It shows most Americans, let's see if we could bring that up, most Americans still predicting, despite those first poll numbers we saw with Romney slightly ahead, that Obama's going to win. Look at that. We have 58%. Saying Obama will win. This is both Republicans, Democrats, Independents all together. 36% saying Mitt Romney would win. Frank, that would suggest to me that a lot of Republicans, even though they'll vote for Romney, are resigned to feeling that Obama's going to win.
Well, that's right. Remember, when the same people that told us Obama was going to win in the sample that you're looking at there also were evenly tied when we said who are you going to vote for. And when we get into the data, it is the Republicans that are less confident. The significant majority of Democrats say their man's going to win, but we've got, 20-30% of Republicans who kind of say, even though I'm supporting Mitt Romney, our party's nominee, in my heart of hearts, I think Obama's going to win. Now, why is this important? Well, we don't know for sure. We do know that Americans have been pretty accurate when they predict the winner historically, and also it could affect momentum. In other words, maybe this will be good for Romney because his people are going to get out there and work even harder thinking that they're behind in the race. Maybe not. We don't know. But all we know is at this point, there are a lot of Republicans out there who are secretly saying to themselves, it looks like maybe Obama's going to win when the dust settles.
So there's a psychological factor there as well. The Gallup analysis, or perhaps your analysis, maybe they're the same in this case, suggests that Obama beats Mitt Romney hands down when it comes to what we call that likability factor. Voters tend to like the guy. However, when it comes to the economy and who is most competent to handle a sour economy, they say Romney. Is that going to work to Romney's advantage, given that this is an election where everyone says, like Clinton said, it's about the economy, stupid?
Well, you know, I think you put your finger there in our Gallup analysis is what you're referring to there on the key elements of this campaign. Barack Obama is simply a very likable guy. He also wins not only on being likable, that's an interesting word, but we use it in polling, likable, but he also wins when we say who cares the most about people like you, who understands your problems. Any of those kind of softer personal dimensions, Obama wins and Romney doesn't. Partly that's because Romney is new to the scene, and partly it's because Romney looks stiff and wooden, and I think people don't really understand it. And partly it's because the Democrats have been working very hard to paint Romney as a very rich man, which he is, and therefore out of touch with average Americans. So that's the place where Obama does best. But as you say, when we ask Americans what's the most important problem facing the United States, and when we say what's the highest priority for the next president, voters come back to us and say it is the economy, and that's a real strength for Mitt Romney on a relative basis.
Do you have any?
So the story of this election will be how these two battle each other and which one's going to win, the likable president or the one who perhaps cold-heartedly does a better job with the economy. Do
you have any sort of public opinion research or Gallup stats to suggest I'm, say, an out of work, I'm an unemployed voter in the Midwest or whatever, in a swing state, but I like Obama a lot. Am I going to vote for Romney because I'm unemployed and out of work, think Romney will put me back in a job, or because I just like Obama? Where do they tend to go?
Well, that's what we're going to wait and see. I don't think our evidence is definitive on that right now. As I said, we don't know which of these two is going to win out, particularly for those voters that might be on the fence right now. We simply know these are the relative strengths of Obama and the relative strengths of Romney, and they're battling it out. Now, they're going to try to change these. One of Romney's big goals at the Republican convention is to try to be more likable. How's that? And, of course, Obama's trying to say, I can do a good job in the economy. So we'll see where this all comes out over the next 2 months.
So Romney will want to own both likability and the economy. I want to move on to another issue in polling. It's this gender gap, this divide between the preferences between female-male voters that we keep seeing. And Obama seems to be overwhelmingly getting the votes of women, or will get the votes of women, whereas Romney will get most of the male votes.
Yes, and that's not new in American politics. We've seen it in previous elections, but you're absolutely right. If only women went to the polls on November 6th here in the United States, Obama would win going away. If only men went to the polls on November 6th, Romney would win going away. You put those two together, and they're virtually even. But that gender gap is there, it's evident, it's real, and it's there just as much this year as it has been in previous years.
What about the attack ads? We hear a lot about that on this side of the Atlantic. We've seen a lot of those ads. They are slugging it out on these paid political advertisements. Do those tend to have an effect in the polls? Do they cancel each other out?
Well, we don't see a lot of movement. I should point out Americans don't like those ads. They tell us they don't like the ads and don't pay them any attention, but they seem to work. So that's why they pay, the two campaigns are spending hundreds of millions, if not $1 billion US on these television ads. But the bottom line is the bottom line. And we've seen all these ads, and as we track the race, we've seen very little change. The two candidates were tied back in April. They were tied in May, tied in June. Maybe Obama went a little ahead in July, but now they're back tied again, essentially. So we just don't see that all this money being spent has made much difference.
It's making much difference. But where we do see the candidates really, really battling it out for the hearts and minds of American voters, it's come down to a handful of states, hasn't it, Frank, with these so-called swing states, the states where you really don't know which way they're going to go and everyone wants a few voters. Who are these swing voters? How do you define them?
Well, that's the unique American way we run elections, is that it's winning. You have to pile up the number of states, not the actual popular vote. And that makes it unique, and it means voters in New York and California, two good examples, or in Texas, don't really matter because those states are pretty preordained to go one way or the other. You can define swing voters two ways. One is where they live. As I just mentioned, if you're a voter in the United States and live in California, which is going to vote Democrat, or you live in Texas, which is going to vote Republican, your vote really doesn't matter.
Even if I'm a swing voter. If I'm a swing voter in California, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. You can sit home and it's going to make no difference. Where it does matter is in a few key states. We define about 13 states as the states that could go either way. Other people say it's even down to just 8 states. But the most famous of those is Florida, because in 2000, that was the state that had to go to the Supreme Court to decide whether it was George W. Bush or Al Gore, and that determined the election. So Florida is a big swing state. Ohio is a swing state where the candidates have spent a lot of time. Other upper Midwest states, New Hampshire and the New England, North Carolina and Virginia and Mid-Atlantic, a few states out in the West with a lot of Hispanic voters. These are the swing states that matter this year.
Frank, very briefly, last question here. You know, the Gallup, I think some of your analysis has shown that that the candidate, as I said at the beginning, with the lead going into the conventions since 1952 has won 12 out of 15 elections. On the basis of that, just on that basis, you'd say Romney is going to win the election, according to the Gallup latest tracking poll.
Well, you might want to say that, but I would be more cautionary. Even though we did the analysis, there are exceptions. In 2004, John Kerry was leading George W. Bush, and George W. Bush won re-election in 2004. So that's a recent example of where that rule didn't hold. So yes, the tendency would be that, but the two cautions are, one, Mitt Romney being ahead by only 1 point really isn't a lead at all statistically.
It's and with
two,
the margin. I'm sorry.
Rules are made to have exceptions.
Frank Newport, unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there. I guess at the end, really, what we have to leave it with, it's polls are ultimately just polls. We won't know until Election Day, obviously, but it is a very tight race at this point going into the conventions. Frank Newport, editor-in-chief of Gallup and one of America's biggest pollster. Thanks for spending some time and talking us through the numbers today here on The Interview on France 24. And thanks to all of you for watching.